For more than a decade, Taylor Swift's fans have learned to look for clues. A lyric, a color, a number, a photograph, a hidden message in a music video. Sometimes, an entire album could feel like a diary written in code. But on July 3rd, according to the source story, Taylor Swift didn't leave her fans a clue. She gave them the ending. At Madison Square Garden in New York City, surrounded by family, friends, musicians, actors, NFL stars, longtime collaborators, and some of the biggest names in entertainment, Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce reportedly stood together and said the two words that changed everything: "I do." And if the details in this account are accurate, this wasn't simply another celebrity wedding. It was the culmination of a relationship that had unfolded in front of millions of people. A relationship that began with a football player joking about a friendship bracelet. A relationship that turned into stadium appearances, football games, surprise moments, public declarations, private milestones, and eventually an engagement. And now, according to the story, marriage. But what makes this moment especially fascinating is that Taylor Swift spent much of her career writing about the uncertainty of love. The excitement, the heartbreak, the fear, the wondering, the waiting, the question of whether someone would stay. And now, after years of turning those emotions into some of the most successful songs in modern music, she was reportedly standing at the altar with someone she had chosen to spend the rest of her life with. And the details of that day are almost impossible to ignore. Because this wasn't a quiet ceremony at a tiny chapel. It wasn't a secret destination wedding on a remote island. It was Madison Square Garden, one of the most recognizable arenas in the world. A place where Taylor had performed. A place associated with some of the biggest moments in music and sports history. And according to the source, the couple deliberately leaned into the sheer unexpectedness of it all. That alone tells us something about this chapter of Taylor's life. For years, the world expected Taylor Swift's wedding to become one of the most heavily guarded celebrity events imaginable. And yet the story describes something much more ambitious. A wedding designed to feel enormous, intimate, theatrical, emotional, and unmistakably personal all at the same time. And perhaps the most Taylor Swift detail of all? Even the handkerchiefs reportedly had a story behind them. Guests were allegedly given embroidered tissues featuring a TT heart logo and a line associated with one of Taylor's songs, "So, it's going to be forever." That line from Blank Space suddenly took on a completely different meaning. For years, fans heard Taylor sing about forever as part of a complicated romantic fantasy. Now, according to this account, she was using those words at her own wedding. And that's where this story becomes bigger than a celebrity event. Because Taylor Swift's relationship with Travis Kelce has always been watched differently from almost every other relationship in her life. There were no anonymous dates that stayed completely hidden. There was no mystery surrounding whether they were actually together. The romance unfolded in stadiums, on television, during concerts, through public appearances, and eventually, through Taylor's own words. She once described Travis as someone who makes her feel happy, confident, and free. Later, she called him her favorite person she'd ever met. And now, according to this wedding account, that favorite person had become her husband. If you're a Swiftie who has followed every era, every album, every relationship chapter, and every unexpected turn in Taylor's story, this is exactly why Taylor Timeline exists. Because we're not just following the headline. We're following the journey that made the headline possible. So if you want to keep up with every major chapter in Taylor's story, subscribe to Taylor Timeline and stay with us. Because this particular chapter has a lot more to it than a wedding dress and a famous guest list. There was a story behind the vows. A story behind the location. A story behind the people Taylor chose to stand beside her. And perhaps most importantly, a story behind the man she chose to marry. Because to understand why this wedding matters so much, we have to go all the way back to the beginning. July 2023. At the time, Taylor Swift was in the middle of one of the biggest tours in music history. The Eras Tour had already become a cultural phenomenon. Every concert was an event. Every outfit was analyzed. Every song change generated headlines. Every celebrity appearance became a story of its own. And then Travis Kelce entered the picture. Not through some glamorous Hollywood party. Not through a carefully arranged red carpet introduction. But through a friendship bracelet. Kelce had attended Taylor's Eras tour show in Kansas City. Like millions of fans, he knew about the tradition of exchanging friendship bracelets. And he had apparently decided to make one himself. Except there was a problem. He wanted to give Taylor a bracelet containing his phone number. But he never got the opportunity. And rather than quietly forgetting about it, Kelce publicly talked about the missed connection. That moment became the kind of seemingly insignificant detail that fans later looked back on and realized had become part of a much bigger story. Because somewhere in the enormous machinery of celebrity life, two people who had never really known each other were suddenly on each other's radar. Then came September. Taylor appeared at a Kansas City Chiefs game. And everything changed. For Swifties, it was one of those moments when the entire internet seemed to stop. Taylor wasn't watching the game from some distant private box where nobody could see her. She was visible. She was cheering. She was reacting. And she was sitting with Travis Kelce's mother. Suddenly, the friendship bracelet story wasn't just a funny podcast anecdote anymore. There was clearly something happening. And what followed was a relationship that seemed to move through different stages at extraordinary speed. At first, there was curiosity. Then excitement. Then scrutiny. Then acceptance. And eventually, something much more powerful happened. People started seeing them as a couple rather than as two celebrities who happened to be dating. Taylor became part of Travis's football world. Travis became part of Taylor's music world. They showed up for each other. They celebrated together. They traveled. They supported each other's careers. And slowly, something that initially looked like an unlikely celebrity pairing started to feel surprisingly natural. That may be one of the most important parts of their story. Because on paper, Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce came from completely different worlds. She was one of the biggest musicians on the planet. He was one of the NFL's most recognizable stars. Her life revolved around recording studios, stadium concerts, songwriting sessions, choreography, rehearsals, and music. His life revolved around playbooks, locker rooms, training camps, physical preparation, game plans, and football. But the differences may have been exactly what made the relationship so fascinating. Taylor understood what it meant to live under constant public attention. Travis understood what it meant to perform under pressure. Both were surrounded by enormous expectations. Both were used to having millions of people analyze their every move. And both knew what it meant to have an entire industry waiting for them to succeed. That common ground mattered. Then came the engagement. According to the source, Travis proposed in August 2025. And suddenly, the relationship had entered another chapter. The dating story had become an engagement story. And eventually, according to this account, the engagement became a marriage. But there was something else happening during those years. Taylor wasn't simply building a relationship. She was building an entirely different kind of life. Taylor Swift's career has always been deeply connected to the idea of transformation. Country Taylor became Pop Taylor. The girl with the guitar became a global stadium performer. The songwriter became a producer. The celebrity became a business empire. And through every transformation, one thing remained remarkably consistent. Taylor wrote about what she was experiencing. Sometimes directly. Sometimes metaphorically. Sometimes through characters. Sometimes through clues that fans would spend months decoding. But relationships remained one of the most recognizable themes throughout her career. That is why her relationship with Travis was always going to become part of the conversation surrounding her music. According to the source, Travis became not only Taylor's partner, but also a muse for her latest work. The story specifically connects their relationship to the life of a showgirl. And whether every song on that project should be interpreted through the lens of Travis is ultimately something only Taylor can answer. But there is no question that love has always been part of her creative vocabulary. What makes this chapter different is the emotional language surrounding it. Taylor has spoken about feeling happy, confident, free. Those are very different words from the language fans often associate with some of her earlier romantic eras. And that distinction matters. Because Taylor's story isn't simply about finding someone. It's about becoming someone. The Taylor Swift who entered the public eye as a teenager is not the same woman standing at the center of this wedding story. She has experienced extraordinary success. She's experienced criticism. She's experienced public heartbreak. She's faced invasive scrutiny. She's watched relationships become headlines. She's had moments where the world seemed to believe it knew what was happening inside her private life. And through all of it, she kept writing. She kept performing. She kept moving. So when fans look at a wedding photo and see Taylor smiling beside Travis, they're not just seeing a bride. They're seeing the latest version of a person whose entire adult life has unfolded in front of an audience. And that's why the vows reportedly carried so much emotional weight. According to the source, Taylor's vows were described as real, vulnerable, serious, and silly. That combination is important, because it sounds less like a carefully manufactured celebrity moment and more like two people who knew exactly who they were standing in front of. Taylor reportedly praised Travis for something that had nothing to do with football. Nothing to do with fame. Nothing to do with his career. She highlighted the fact that during high school, he would spend lunch periods sitting with bullied students. And according to the story, she told their friends and family that she wished she'd known someone like that when she was in high school. That detail may have been one of the most personal moments of the entire ceremony. Because it wasn't about Travis Kelce, the NFL star. It was about Travis Kelce, the person. The person Taylor had gotten to know away from the stadium. Away from the cameras. Away from the headlines. And according to the source, Travis became emotional during the vows. Imagine the scene. Taylor Swift standing in front of the people closest to her. Her brother beside her. Her family watching. Friends who had witnessed the entire relationship. And across from her, Travis Kelce. A man whose entire professional life has been about controlling emotion under pressure. Except this wasn't a football field. There was no opponent. No scoreboard. No comeback. No fourth quarter. Just Taylor. And apparently, that was enough to bring tears. Then there was the fashion. And naturally, this was not going to be an ordinary wedding wardrobe. According to the source, Taylor's ceremony gown was created by Christian Dior Haute Couture. Travis also reportedly wore a white tuxedo from Dior. Both looks were created in close collaboration with the couple and designer Jonathan Anderson. Taylor reportedly changed into a second look for the reception. She wore Christian Louboutin heels and Cartier jewelry. And according to one friend quoted in the story, she was glowing throughout the evening. But the fashion was only one piece of the spectacle. Because the venue itself was transformed. Madison Square Garden is enormous. It's built for thousands of people. It's built for concerts, basketball games, hockey, major events. But according to the story, the couple wanted to make it feel like something entirely different. The arena seating was reportedly covered in white. Ferns and trees were brought in. The environment was transformed to create something resembling a forest. And the effect was apparently intended to make the enormous arena feel almost intimate. That transformation reportedly came with a staggering price tag. Celebrity event designer Edward Perotti estimated that renting the venue could cost around $1 million per day, while putting the overall wedding somewhere in the neighborhood of $35 million to $50 million. Those numbers should be treated as estimates rather than confirmed accounting. But even if the exact price is unknown, the scale of the event is difficult to deny. This was not a wedding designed to disappear. It was a wedding designed to become a moment. And privacy was apparently one reason Madison Square Garden made sense. According to the source, underground tunnels and heavily secured areas helped keep paparazzi away. The couple reportedly took additional measures to protect the guest experience. Invitations were intentionally vague. Guests allegedly had their phones locked away in special cases. That meant that for several hours, one of the most photographed couples in the world could simply exist inside the venue without every moment immediately appearing online. And outside, it was a completely different story. Because hundreds, perhaps thousands, of people wanted to experience the wedding even though they weren't invited. Swifties gathered outside Madison Square Garden. News crews gathered. Photographers waited. Fans reportedly endured temperatures approaching 100 degrees during a brutal New York heatwave. They couldn't see everything happening inside. But they waited anyway. And that says something about Taylor Swift's relationship with her fans. Her audience has always been unusually invested in her personal journey. For many Swifties, Taylor's career isn't just a collection of albums. It's a timeline of their own lives. People remember where they were when they first heard certain songs. They remember the first concert, the first heartbreak, the first relationship, the first time a Taylor lyric seemed to describe exactly what they were feeling. So when Taylor got married, some fans weren't simply watching a celebrity wedding. They were watching the conclusion of a story they had been following for years. And then came one of the most cinematic moments of the entire account. Shortly after Taylor and Travis reportedly said their vows, the weather changed. A torrential downpour swept across New York City. And then, according to the source, the storm gave way to a rainbow. A rainbow over the city skyline. For any ordinary wedding, that would have been beautiful. For a Taylor Swift wedding, fans were always going to notice the symbolism. Especially because Taylor's music has repeatedly used storms, rain, light, skies, and weather as emotional imagery. Then came another detail. The Empire State Building reportedly changed its lighting to give the newlyweds their own version of something blue. At that point, the entire city almost seemed to be participating. Inside Madison Square Garden, Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce were celebrating their marriage. Outside, fans were waiting. And above them, New York itself appeared to become part of the story. Of course, no Taylor Swift wedding could ever be small when it comes to the guest list. According to the source, the room included actors such as Brad Pitt, Emma Stone, Mariska Hargitay, and Tom Hanks. NFL royalty reportedly included Tom Brady, Rob Gronkowski, and Patrick Mahomes. The music world was represented by names including Sabrina Carpenter and Miranda Lambert, along with members of Taylor's band and Era's tour dancers. Steven Spielberg was reportedly there. And that's particularly interesting because he had recently introduced Taylor at the Songwriters Hall of Fame ceremony. Then there were the people who weren't simply famous. The people who mattered because they were family. Taylor's brother Austin reportedly served as her man of honor. Travis's brother Jason served as his best man. And according to the source, the couple intentionally skipped the traditional bridal party setup. That decision made the wedding feel more personal. Instead of surrounding themselves with a massive lineup of celebrity bridesmaids and groomsmen, they reportedly chose the people closest to them. Family first. And then came one of the most unexpected details. Adam Sandler reportedly officiated the ceremony. For Travis, the connection was especially meaningful because Sandler had recently worked with him following the athlete's cameo in Happy Gilmore 2. Imagine being a kid watching Adam Sandler movies and then years later having that same person standing in front of you while you marry Taylor Swift. That's the kind of detail that sounds almost too Hollywood to be real. And according to Chiefs coach Andy Reid, Sandler's advice to the newlyweds was simple: keep kissing. It was funny. It was personal. And it fit the atmosphere described throughout the story. Because despite the enormous celebrity presence, one friend reportedly said the wedding didn't feel like a typical Hollywood party. People weren't acting like they were at some distant celebrity event. They were talking to family friends. They were celebrating. They were reportedly amazed by the atmosphere. There was an energy in the room. And perhaps that's exactly what Taylor and Travis wanted. Not a celebrity showcase. A celebration. Then came the reception. According to the source, Taylor's mother Andrea welcomed guests into the reception area. And the entertainment lineup was extraordinary. Stevie Nicks. Paul McCartney. The Beatles classic, I Want to Hold Your Hand. Think about the symbolism of that. A song about holding hands. At the wedding of two people whose relationship became one of the most visible love stories in the world. And the food reportedly matched the scale of the occasion. Italian dishes. Pasta served from a Parmesan wheel. Sushi. Steak. Burgers. Fries. Seafood. And bars throughout the venue. Because Travis Kelce was involved. And apparently, this wasn't going to be a wedding where everyone simply sat quietly at a formal dinner table. There were games. There was competition. There was a raffle. Guests could reportedly win designer bags. And one of the prizes was especially sentimental. The same car Travis had driven Taylor in after her first Chiefs game in September 2023. That car had been part of the beginning of their public relationship. And now, it had apparently become part of their wedding celebration. That's the kind of detail that makes the whole story feel circular. The car. The Chiefs game. The friendship bracelet. The first public appearance. The engagement. And now the wedding. A relationship that began with a missed opportunity to meet had apparently reached the point where the couple was turning pieces of their history into wedding memories. One of the most fascinating parts of the story isn't actually what happened inside Madison Square Garden. It's what happened outside. Because Taylor Swift's fans weren't invited. But they still wanted to be part of the moment. They gathered outside the arena. They waited through the heat. They watched the entrances. They watched the building. They waited for any sign that the rumors were true. And eventually, at approximately 7:22 p.m., according to the source, large screens outside the venue reportedly flashed a message announcing that Taylor and Travis were married. Minutes later, a representative for Taylor reportedly confirmed the union to People. The statement said the ceremony joined both families together. And just like that, the speculation was over. The relationship that began publicly in 2023 had reached its next chapter. Married. Husband and wife. And suddenly, the story that fans had spent years analyzing was no longer about whether Taylor and Travis would make it. It was about what comes next. That's a fascinating shift. Because Taylor Swift's relationships have historically been discussed in terms of beginnings. Who inspired which song? When did they start dating? What happened? When did they break up? What lyric references what event? But marriage changes the narrative. There isn't the same uncertainty. There isn't the same question of whether this is going to last. At least according to this story, Taylor and Travis have chosen forever. And perhaps that's why the wedding carries such emotional weight for longtime fans. Taylor's music has always understood uncertainty. But this moment represents certainty. And even if fans have no idea what the future looks like, the message of the wedding itself is remarkably simple. They chose each other. There's another reason this relationship has been so different. Taylor's previous relationships often became visible through music. Fans learned about heartbreak through lyrics. They connected clues. They compared timelines. They analyzed songs. With Travis, much of the relationship happened in public. Fans saw Taylor in the stadium. They saw Travis at the concert. They saw them supporting each other. They saw their families interacting. They saw the relationship evolve. That doesn't mean fans knew everything. Far from it. But the public saw more of the relationship as it happened. And Taylor herself seemed increasingly comfortable allowing that. She didn't appear to be hiding the relationship. She didn't treat it like something shameful. She appeared to enjoy it. She appeared to have fun. And that's an important distinction. Because for someone whose entire life has been dissected by the public, choosing to share happiness can be an act of confidence. Taylor once spent years being criticized for dating. Now she could walk into a football stadium, sit beside Travis's family, cheer for him, and simply enjoy the moment. And Travis seemed equally comfortable stepping into Taylor's world. He attended concerts. He appeared alongside her in public moments. He became part of the Eras Tour phenomenon. And eventually, their relationship became almost impossible to separate from the larger pop culture landscape. It wasn't simply Taylor Swift dating an NFL player. It became Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce, a combined cultural phenomenon. And now, according to the source, that phenomenon has entered marriage. But here's the question nobody can answer yet. What happens after the wedding? Because a wedding is an ending. But it's also a beginning. And Taylor and Travis aren't walking into an ordinary newlywed life. Travis still has football. According to the source, he decided to return to the Chiefs for another season despite retirement speculation. Taylor has music. She has projects. She has her own schedule, her own career, her own creative world. And their lives are going to remain extraordinarily busy. According to the source, the couple was expected to attend NFL star Juju Smith-Schuster's wedding in California shortly after their own. Then football season would begin again. Travis would head toward Chiefs training camp. And Taylor would continue navigating a career unlike anything the music industry has ever seen. That's the reality behind the fairy tale. Marriage doesn't erase the pressure. It doesn't erase the cameras. It doesn't erase the schedules. It doesn't erase the expectations. If anything, the attention becomes even greater. But perhaps that's why their relationship has survived this long. They already know what it's like to be watched. They already know what it's like to have strangers analyze them. They already know what it's like to have every public appearance become a headline. And if the source's description of their relationship is accurate, they have continued choosing to show up for one another anyway. That may ultimately be more meaningful than any wedding detail. Not the dress. Not the guest list. Not the venue. Not the flowers. Not the rainbow. Not even the famous performers. The real story is that two people with incredibly complicated lives apparently found a way to build something together. There is a temptation whenever Taylor Swift gets married to reduce the story to one sentence. Taylor Swift married Travis Kelce. But that sentence doesn't capture what happened. Because Taylor Swift didn't become Taylor Swift overnight. She spent decades building this life. She was a teenager with a guitar. Then a country star. Then a pop superstar. Then a record-breaking touring artist. Then a songwriter whose influence extended far beyond music. And throughout that journey, she kept writing about one of humanity's oldest questions. Can love actually last? Maybe that's why this moment feels so significant to fans. For years, Taylor wrote about love as a question. Now, according to this account, she has made a decision. She chose Travis. And Travis chose her. That's the emotional center of this story. Not the millions spent. Not the famous guests. Not the headlines. Not the stadium. Not the spectacle. The choice. And perhaps the most beautiful thing about the wedding is that the people around them weren't simply celebrities. They were people who had been part of their lives. Taylor's family. Travis's family. Friends. Teammates. Collaborators. Musicians. People who had watched the relationship evolve. And when the vows were finally spoken, they were reportedly all there. There is a line in Taylor Swift's catalog that has taken on an entirely different meaning in this story. So, it's going to be forever. For years, fans heard it as a clever lyric. At this wedding, according to the source, it became part of the ceremony itself. That transformation is almost poetic. A lyric becoming a wedding detail. A friendship bracelet becoming a relationship. A football game becoming a first public chapter. An engagement becoming a marriage. And a relationship once viewed by some as an unlikely celebrity pairing becoming, at least according to this account, a family story. Taylor Swift has spent her career turning life into songs. But maybe the most important stories aren't always the ones she writes down. Sometimes they're the ones she lives. And if this wedding account is accurate, July 3rd wasn't simply the day Taylor Swift wore white. It was the day one of the most followed love stories of the modern celebrity era entered an entirely new chapter. The world watched. Swifties waited outside. The stars gathered inside. The music played. The vows were spoken. The rain came down. Then the rainbow appeared. And somewhere in the middle of all that noise, Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce became husband and wife. For a woman who has spent so much of her life writing about the search for something lasting, that may be the most important lyric of all. Not a song. Not a clue. Not an Easter egg. A choice. And whatever happens next, one thing is certain, Taylor Swift's story is not over. In fact, this may be the beginning of one of its most fascinating eras yet. Because now there is football season. There is music. There is marriage. There is family. There are new memories waiting to be made. And perhaps, somewhere down the road, there will be another Taylor Swift song that makes millions of people wonder, was this about Travis? Maybe we'll never know. And perhaps that's part of the magic. Because after spending so many years letting fans decode her love stories through lyrics, Taylor may finally have a story that doesn't need to be decoded. A story that, according to this account, simply says, they found each other. They chose each other. And they said yes. That is why this wedding matters. Not because Taylor Swift is famous. Not because Travis Kelce is an NFL superstar. But because underneath all the cameras, stadiums, Grammys, Super Bowls, red carpets, albums, touchdowns, and headlines, this was still two people standing in front of the people they love and promising to face whatever comes next together. And maybe that's the part Swifties will remember long after the flowers are gone and the lights at Madison Square Garden return to normal. The spectacle was unforgettable. But the promise was the real story. And for Taylor Swift, after a lifetime of eras, perhaps this is the one she never has to leave behind. The Forever Era. And here at Taylor Timeline, we'll be here for every chapter that comes next. Because Taylor's story has never really been about one song, one album, one relationship, or one moment. It's about the timeline. And this chapter? This one changed everything.